Most likely there's folks in our audience that haven't heard of AMP. So maybe this is a good segue to go into what AMP does specifically.
Yeah. So there's different ways to think about it, but I will describe it from the perspective of us as humans in 2025 and what it means to be human in 2025. Um, because it's a fairly unique moment and the escalation of change that we're all experiencing as consumers, as users, as people in the world. What AMP does is say, what we've experienced is going from when I was growing up in the 90s, where the vast majority of the world was physical. And you would go to a store, you'd go to a Walmart, and you could pick whatever you could off of the shelves. And you go to a Blockbuster and you'd pick whatever movies you could pick off the shelves. And you go to the library and you pick the books off the shelves. And so you're constrained by the physical infrastructure. And so Walmart in the 90s, typical Walmart would have about 100,000 SKUs on the wall, right? And that felt like everything. That felt like, wow, there's way more. And in fact, for any given person, that's way more than you might want when you go to Walmart. Then what happened as the web came along and personal computing came along, and we all got our own computers and our own laptops, and we weren't working on a family computer, in the living room anymore. And then as we moved online and we moved into mobile, where we have this device in our pockets, we don't have to go to physical stores anymore. We can explore a much larger library catalog of options in the world, whether again it's movies or books or commerce. And Walmart Online has, I think, something like on the order of magnitude of 500 million items. So we went from 100,000 items to 500 million items. In many ways, that's a great thing. More choice, more variety, more ways to find what specifically you might want versus what I want. But the cognitive complexity of that as a human has also exploded. And that means our ability to choose, our ability to kind of navigate that choice, to not, be drowned in FOMO and the paradox of choice is a problem. The way we enable all that content to be reached to users is by building software and building applications. So you can go to Walmart Online, you can go to an app. But if you think about it, if you look as just a regular person, you can look at an application and you can kind of see that we design those applications very similarly to how we design the physical world. So you go to a Walmart and you walk around the rows and aisles of Walmart and you find the shelf. And you go to the Walmart app and you scroll through the rows and columns to find the thing you want. And if you and I go to Walmart, we experience the same thing and we have to find our item amongst all the other items, exactly the same path. And if we go on the app, we for 90% of the time experience the same exact experience. So all of the organizational search responsibility sits with us, and we've come to just sort of like that's what we expect. What AMP does is represents a really deep shift that's happening in software from that way of designing software the way we design the physical world, where you just give a set of instructions and that instruction you design the layout, and then that layout is concrete and it's the same for everybody. To a world, what we call AMP represents what we call agentic infrastructure. So it's infrastructure that has agency itself. And so what it does is actually rebuild itself, recombine itself to present to you the layout and the design that's most effective to help you solve the decision problem you're facing. And so you can think of with AMP, if a business using is AMP, is they're provisioning and generating an agent that's sort of sitting under the hood that is responsible just for interacting with you. And so they can change the UI and UX, they can change the language. If you're, in a DoorDash application or a food delivery application, you're trying to decide what to eat, right? You can think about like, you're not just trying to decide between a burger and a pizza and a taco. You're trying to meet some goals as a person, right? You're trying to bulk up and gain weight because you're eating a lot of protein and lifting, or you're trying to lose weight because you want to have less calories, or you're trying to eat ethically and you want sustainably sourced and organic and friendly, environmentally friendly, or you're just looking for whatever's tastiest and you're paying attention to everybody else, right? So that burger can be presented from any of those frames. And if you present it from those frames, it's a very different story. And so agentic infrastructure and an agent in responsible for that commerce can present different options to you, pay attention to how you respond, and then evolve itself in response to you. And that's what AMP represents, is the infrastructure that enables businesses to increasingly build their applications that way. And ultimately, the goal is for us to open something like Walmart and have our own personalized Walmart. The layout is distinct to us. The structure of it is distinct. The presentation of information, right? And that can be true for any kind of a streaming app as well, right? So we don't want to be told everything about a movie. We want to be told about the plot or the cinematography or the unique brand of humor or who's in it, or a particular screenshot that represents the action-filled adventure that it is.
Mm-hmm.
That's what AMP does.
I'm curious about what the most challenging aspect to this business has been in terms of like scaling it. Is the technology is somewhat like similar? It's plug and play with all these your clients, or is there a fair amount of customization that has to happen before it's deployed?
So one aspect, a key challenge to scale is actually just keeping up with it. The world is changing really fast, and there's a lot of adoption, a lot of interest in adoption. But there's a lot of just nuance to how you execute against that demand, and how do you enable customers to really be successful. The thing about software, the thing about technology in general, is technology is a tool for a purpose. It's not a great way of choosing purpose, right? Like I'm here in San Francisco, and 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I think a lot of people in the world, even data scientists, would have been like, autonomous driving, yeah, it's a great concept. It's not really practical. Yeah, the technology is way out. And now it's just, it's a normal way to get around, to drive around without a driver. But Waymo's not choosing where you want to go or why you want to go there or when you want to leave or anything like that. They're just handling the tactical, onerous problem of turning right and slowing down and not hitting that person who's crossing the street. But they don't solve the what and why and where problem. And that's true in general. And I would say the adoption challenge reality is, okay, so in a rules-based world, in a world where I just design exactly the way I want it, I can know where it deviates from what I wanted. Now, I don't know if what I wanted is actually what's good, especially if I'm serving end customers. And we live in a world where diversity is sort of almost like a social principle, like a value, a deeply held belief that as individuals, we are not represented by our age or gender or religion or economic class. Those simplified descriptors of us are not who we are. We are unique. So if you have a business with 1 million customers, you want to interact with them in a way that reflects their values, their preferences, et cetera. But what that means is if you then provision an agent for every one of them, so we have 1 million agents, you still are responsible for their interaction with that end customer as a business, as an enterprise. Mm-hmm. So there's a management problem. And there's a kind of problem. It's kind of like any business as it scales. You have to hire employees. You want to delegate to employees to do a great job by using their own creativity and initiative and knowledge, but you also don't want them to do whatever they want. You don't want them to say, like, sell my business, and they go sell, well, we'll do whatever, They have to have guidelines. So what we now require is, if a business uses AMP and sort of says, all right, I'm going to provision 1 million agents, how do I manage those agents? How do I give them guidelines? I don't over-prescribe strict rules to them. I let them calibrate and run experiments, but within guidelines, within preferences. And how do I set strategic direction? What do I really care about? What do I really want them to do? I take a streaming app, for example. A narrow goal for a streaming app is to get you to watch content, right? And that might mean that we get you really great content in front of you. And that might lead to what many people know as binge watching. Binge watching can be a rewarding, pleasurable experience. It can also have a lot of negative effects. You spend a whole weekend and you're in front of a screen, and when you come out the other side, you're kind of like, ugh, I feel gross. And you may not watch again for another 2 months, right? And so that business now has to think about its long-term versus short-term goal and reward. They can increase watch time over the next 2 days. But if that kind of harms you strategically as a watcher and as a viewer and as a person in the world, you may not come back and watch anything for a long time because you're just like, I got to shut it off. I got to cut it off. That's not in that business's interests either. So they have to decide, right? Are they going to push you in the short term or do they want to create a long term? And that's a strategic values-based decision that, again, infrastructure and technology can't solve. So the challenge to scale right now is helping organizations that are complex themselves, large enterprises with hundreds or thousands of employees, with very established workflows, with very clear ways of measuring success. All of a sudden, agentic AI represents this massive improvement, massive change. They have to figure out how to absorb that change and evolve. And so our job is not just to deliver technology, it's to deliver the ability for those organizations to change as they adopt that technology and by adopting that technology.